Hey everyone, Brandon here from TruckSafe. Following on the heels of President Trump's recent executive order on English proficiency among regulated commercial drivers, the FMCSA has just released its much anticipated enforcement policy to provide law enforcement with additional details about how exactly English proficiency will be addressed roadside going forward. So how exactly will it work? That's what we're diving into in this video, so stick around and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons below. On May 20th, 2025, the FMCSA issued a so-called enforcement policy prompted by President Trump's earlier executive order number 14286, signed on April 28th. Like the executive order, the FMCSA's policy document is all about ensuring regulated drivers can communicate in English and understand road signs. For those that may have missed our last video on the topic, here's the backstory. Since the 1930s, federal regulations, currently 49 CFR section 391.11b2, have required regulated drivers operating in interstate commerce to be able to respond to inquiries and comprehend English language traffic signs in order to be qualified to operate. In other words, this isn't a new rule, but enforcement has been inconsistent. Back in 2005, the CVSA added English proficiency violations to its out-of-service criteria, meaning drivers who couldn't communicate in English effectively during roadside inspections could be sidelined. FMCSA supported this with policies in 2007 and 2008, giving inspectors tools to test communication and sign recognition. But in 2015, the CVSA dropped these violations from its out-of-service criteria, and FMCSA issued a 2016 policy that softened things up further, telling inspectors to cite violations without putting drivers out of service, and to allow drivers to communicate with interpreters or apps. Now that's all changing. FMCSA notes in its enforcement policy that lax enforcement of English proficiency is a serious safety risk that could lead to crashes. The new guidance reverses the 2016 approach. Starting June 25th of 2025, law enforcement must begin roadside inspections in English, and if a driver struggles with initial instructions from the officer, they'll face a two-step English proficiency assessment at that point. Step 1 is a driver interview to check if they can respond to official inquiries in English. No interpreters or apps are allowed, as they could disguise a driver's inability to communicate effectively in English. If the driver fails Step 1, they'll be cited for violating the English proficiency regulation and placed out of service. If they pass Step 1, Step 2 then tests their ability to understand U.S. highway signs, including those in the Federal Highway Administration's manual on uniform traffic control devices and dynamic message signs. Again, if they fail Step 2, they'll be written up for a violation and placed out of service. If they pass, then the officer will continue with the rest of the standard inspection. There's one glaring issue here with the FMCSA's enforcement policy, at least the publicly available version of it. The policy's attachments, which are supposed to include sample interviewed questions and traffic sign examples, which officers are supposed to use in their assessments, are blacked out. This leaves carriers and drivers guessing about what specifically inspectors will ask, making it a little tough to prepare. Putting that issue aside, the stakes of noncompliance are high. Earlier this month, May of 2025, the CVSA voted to bring English proficiency violations back into its out-of-service criteria, effective, again, June 25th of 2025. Once that kicks in, drivers cited for these violations will be placed out of service immediately, stopping them from driving, meaning the load will need to be repowered by another driver. Inspectors may also start disqualification proceedings, though it's unclear exactly what that process looks like. Officers will need to document everything, like the driver's responses or lack thereof, to back up their actions in roadside inspection reports. We should also note that there are some exceptions to this new enforcement policy. Drivers in U.S.-Mexico border commercial zones will get citations, but won't face out-of-service orders or disqualification by virtue of international agreements the U.S. has in place with Mexico. Also, hearing-impaired drivers who are granted exemptions under the driver qualification rules are considered compliant if they can read and write English, based on 2014 FMCSA guidance on that topic. Lastly, this new enforcement policy applies nationwide, but will not apply in U.S. territories like Puerto Rico and Guam. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy drove this point home at a press conference in Austin, Texas on May 20th, where he signed an order formalizing the guidelines. In that conference, he stated that America first means safety first, stressing that drivers who can't read signs or communicate in English are a public safety risk. He praised the CVSA for quickly agreeing to reintegrate these violations into the out-of-service criteria, aligning with the president's push for safer highways. For some trucking companies, this will be a wake-up call. The return of out-of-service consequences could mean costly delays, especially without clear details on English proficiency assessments that will be used in roadside inspections. For their part, drivers face tougher scrutiny and potential downtime, so English proficiency tests in the hiring process and training programs when necessary are more critical than ever. One open question is how drivers placed out of service for these violations can get back on the road, and the policy doesn't address that particular question. All right, to wrap things up here, FMCSA's renewed focus on English proficiency will undoubtedly cause some shakeups, at least in the near term. Carriers and drivers need to ensure they are prepared to deal with the new enforcement policy come late June. For more on this, check out our full article on the topic over at trucksafe.com. It's got all the details, plus practical tips for staying compliant. If you want to dive even deeper into these types of topics, head over to trucksafeacademy.com for our online compliance courses for safety managers and for drivers. Need an easier way to navigate the federal rules? Check out eRegs at eregs.app. It's the first app-based version of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations built to help you stay on top of compliance. Also, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter at trucksafe.com/subscribe and follow us on our various social media pages for the latest highway transportation news and analysis. Thanks for watching.